On this edition, we have with us Dr. Kelley Gallt, and I want to make sure I get this right. You are the superintendent of Lake Zurich Community Unit School District 95 outside of Chicago. That I did it well. Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here. So these are superintendent stories, and it's stories from the field. And so we want to make sure that during our conversation, we're elevating some of the great work that's happening in your school district and how you're leading that in the midst of all of everything else that's happening right now. So we're going to jump right in, if that's fine with you, so that we can jump right through to the important stuff. So several questions I have for you, but I really want to start with the work that you're doing around your strategic plan and thinking about visioning for that and the process that you're using. So walk us through your process for developing. I think your strategic plan is Empower 95. Yeah. So how did you ensure authentic representation from all stakeholder groups, and how are you keeping them engaged in the process?
Great question. So that process started with a very deliberate plan of engaging our community and looking at all stakeholders. So we started with students, which most people probably wouldn't have started with, but we started with making sure that we had student representation from 6th grade through 12th grade. And so they were a part of every single process. And then we looked to our staff. And then we looked to our families, our community. We had our emergency groups involved from all 5 of the villages that feed into our district. We had our mayors involved. Certainly board members are a part of that process. We had 2 different teams, which I do think helped us to involve more individuals. We had a team that worked specifically on our portrait of a graduate, which is something our district did not have previous. And then we also had a group that really worked on the actual strategic plan. And so we partnered with an outside individual through a group that I belong with, which is called LUDA. It's our Large Unit Districts of Illinois. And so that group does a lot for our state, for larger districts like mine. But we partnered with him, and he was able to kind of guide us and give us some information that would help us. But really, I think it's been pretty easy to continue that journey with our stakeholders because they had such a powerful voice through the process. So they still want to be involved. And we have a stakeholder advisory team now who every single year is looking at it because we meet with them about 9 times a year. And so they're able to continue that work with us as well as our teacher leaders and our administrators and our kids.
Yeah. So, as a longtime educator and former superintendent, one of the things that I still love to this very day is engaging with students, because honestly, they tell you everything you need to know. It depends on whether or not we choose to act on what they tell us, but they always tell us. So, what were some of the most surprising or impactful insights that you gained from engaging with students directly as a part of that strategic planning process?
Well, one of the pieces that actually did surprise me is that the students shared with us that they had no idea we even had a strategic plan. They had no idea that we set goals and that we tried to achieve those each year. And so they were surprised by the level of involvement and all of the work that goes into planning each year and planning a vision for the district. And so that helped me to understand that we need to do a better job, I guess I would say, of bringing students into the forefront of decision-making and planning efforts. And so hearing their voices about that was pretty powerful. And they're not afraid. They're not afraid. They're not afraid to present. They're not afraid to share what they think. We're going through one of our action plans is related to our one-to-one initiative. And so we're walking through that again. And I think in years past, we probably would have had a small representative, a group of students that would give voice. And this time, not only do we do a survey to collect a great wide spread of voices, but we're doing focus groups and we're hearing from over 1,000 students in our district about their feelings. And so I think it's inspired us to do better in that regard. But that piece was a little bit surprising that they had no idea.
So thinking about that as well, how are you looking at the accountability and the transparency in continuing to communicate not just your goals, but the actions or the results of those goals? Thinking about the fact that the kids didn't even really realize that, we do this work and we actually are trying to get somewhere. So how are you thinking about that in terms of accountability?
So, as far as accountability is concerned, we've redesigned our entire structure for strategic planning. It used to be that we would establish either confirm or adjust our mission, walk through a vision processing, plan, create goals and action plans for a specified period of time, usually 3 to 5 years. And so we've restructured that completely. And so now we have strategies and objectives we want to achieve over a period of time, which our plan is for 5 years.
Okay.
However, each one of the action plans that we set up to reach those strategies and objectives is set up annually or biannually. It depends on how long the plan might be for. But when you do that, each year you have to engage a group of individuals to relook at your plan and then to say, okay, what makes sense in moving us forward now? Times are changing. And that's something we found in our last plan. We were pretty bound to a 5-year plan, but a pandemic happened.
Right.
And so that created some concerns and issues for us as we were trying to achieve what we had shared with the community and all of our stakeholders we would end up achieving. And so now that plan is very different. We have the stakeholder advisory team. We have many different teams now that give voice to all of those action plans each and every year. And then at the beginning of the year, our kickoff now for all of our staff and for our community is centered around our strategic plan and where we're going.
Awesome.
So lots of accountability when
Yeah.
people know where you're going.
Right. And how have you navigated situations where maybe the stakeholders' interests conflicted with your goals for, say, equity or academic achievement? How have you navigated some of that?
So I guess I would say that our ultimate goal is not different. Our ultimate goal, and I remind everybody of this all the time, is that when our kids leave us, we want them to have the greatest opportunities, the greatest amount of choice in order to find success when they leave our district. And so I think as long as we're all focused on that, I don't think that you have as many disagreements about where you're headed because we're all headed in the same direction, and that's to support kids. So I continue to reframe all of the work and everything we're doing. It's focused on our students and what our students are going to benefit from that, whether it be equitable access to learning. You can't argue that. We want all of our kids to have exactly what they need when they need it, regardless of their background. You can't argue that. So I think that helps get us to a better place.
Yeah. So there's also a through line here, that takes me back to, in thinking about the conversation today, when you said that our ultimate goal has not changed, right? This is what we're looking to do. Maybe the process may be different. Maybe some of the strategies may be different, but the ultimate goal is still the same. And so the through line, I think, is, during the pandemic, you became known for clear, timely communication with families, which also garners a level of both respect but also trust. And so how did you establish and maintain these practices? And how are honestly you keeping those as a part of the continued work that you're doing in the district?
That's a really good question. I think as I look back on that time, which feels like a really long
It really wasn't.
we had established some different ways to communicate, and I think that helped us. So we expanded those opportunities on how we communicated and how regularly we did so. So for example, on a weekly basis, I met with staff, the entire staff. So there were over 500 staff members who would join our Zoom every single week. And we would talk about, here are the things I need to tell you. What more do you want to know? And so that helped us to make sure that information was readily available to our staff. They weren't necessarily the ones that were delivering special items to families, whether that be, actually working side by side, help make sure that academics were still at the forefront, as well as the social emotional side, but also whatever supplies people needed. And so we would share stories kind of from the field that as we were doing those things on behalf of our staff would direct it, we would execute. And so I think that helped me to understand just how important that regular communication was. We tried to continue them some, but what I found is once you return back to school, you don't necessarily need that same level, but you need representative groups. And so that brought forward an advisory team for students, an advisory team for our staff. But it also helped us to better some of the other parent groups and other things that we had in place. So, for example, our BPAC, which is our bilingual advisory team that we work closely with, we were able to enhance that and the communications through that process. We enhanced our newsletter communications that we have. We created a staff newsletter that provides some greater information. Through those meetings during the pandemic, we were able to celebrate some of the things going on, I would say. And so now through our staff newsletter, we have, for example, one of our world language teachers at the middle school, her son is playing professional baseball. Why not highlight that? There are so many really awesome things that are going on in our lives that we want to highlight. And so some of that communication has remained intact. It just looks a little different today, but it's no less important, I would say.
And so I think I am having a flashback. So if I'm remembering correctly, and I didn't remember it until I saw you today, but I remember last year we were at an IEI convening, and I want to say it was District Leaders Connect in Chicago.
Yes.
And I was there. I was a keynote speaker there at the time, and I remember you talking about highlighting your staff across the district and how your staff was also highlighting other individuals across the district. Talk to me about that. Like, how is that going? Yes.
So
I remember.
yeah, so I'm really excited. So we do a lot about talking about the legacy that we get to leave behind. And so it's just a nice reminder that every single day when you start your day, you get to decide what legacy you want to leave behind, and you do your best to do a good job with that. Part of that is celebrating each other's legacies that we're leaving behind together. In collaboration sometimes and sometimes individually, but it's important to do that because our work is really hard.
Yeah.
And so we try really hard to ensure, especially at the beginning of the year, we're highlighting staff, we're celebrating each other. But we did take away a pretty awesome tool actually from IEI, believe it or not. It's called Highlight. Oh, okay. Uh-oh. Okay. And that tool has really helped us, one, to have our staff be able to honor each other, but it also has really elevated our conversation.
I was never there.
And so highlight, I'm just going to give a highlight for highlight.
Uh-oh. I might get in trouble.
No, I'm so sorry, but I just have to because it really has brought to life some things that we needed to do. Our data from some of our surveys about our staff giving information back to us. Our teacher-to-teacher trust needed to improve. We needed to have better opportunities to celebrate the people within us so that they could feel a greater sense of value. And so this tool is only for staff. And it allows staff to acknowledge and recognize not just the big things, but the little things that are happening. And so when we went to give our Great Place to Work survey again, we are finding that our scores are improving, our staff feel better, and are valued. And then when we look at our state data and we look at our survey through the state, we're also seeing that trust piece grow, especially staff to staff.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
So that leads me to thank you for sharing that. That leads me to thinking about, recruitment and retention, right? Because we know that that's a challenge for many school districts across the country. And I've said previously that I don't know that we have as much of a recruitment issue sometimes as we have a retention issue. Could be hand in hand, but there are some districts that, when you really look at their data, they're losing more teachers than you would expect them to lose, or they're transitioning other places. So how do you think a program like this, where you're recognizing, where staff is recognizing staff, is truly helping to elevate that value, but also helping individuals say, hey, this is a place that I want to continue to stay and work and thrive?
I just think when you do things like that, it does create, and I know this is probably a little cliche, but it does create a family atmosphere. And so, we do depend on each other a lot. And so when you have that relationship, it's hard to walk away from really tight relationships that you have with the people that you work alongside with each and every day. It's hard to walk away from a community that really embraces our educators, who make them feel good about the work they're doing. We have just a phenomenal staff. And We do have some staff who end up eventually, they do make choices to leave. And in Illinois, we are in a situation where we had some elementary only districts, some high school only districts, and then unit districts. And so some of the high school districts that surround me, they are able to pay higher.
Yeah.
And so we have to work really hard to ensure that our teachers want to stay with us. And one of the ways I believe you do that is from creating that atmosphere within your buildings that make people want to stay and continue to be a part of the system. I have a grandson who lives with me that I'm help raising, and I live in our district. I would not choose to live anywhere else.
Yeah.
I know what's happening in our classrooms across our system, and I know he's getting a wonderful, phenomenal education, and he's with people who love him and who care about each other.
Yeah.
Doesn't get any better than that.
So, you're actually defining what excellence looks like, right? And so you've had an opportunity to not only talk about that in terms of what you're doing with your strategic plan or how you're thinking about improvement, and I know that our national blue ribbon, designation has changed a bit, but it's still really important and it means a lot to schools and to school districts and to states. And so you've had the designation, I know in 2024.
Yeah.
What particular focus areas did you find that really helped to elevate the work around getting to that national status?
So I'll say a couple of things first.
Sure.
I have to brag on my district just a
Go right ahead.
So we had a middle school and a high school that were both designated. The high school for achievement, straight out, and then the middle school was a little unique because it was closing the gap.
Oh,
Achievement gap, which is amazing.
yes.
And then we would have had a third one. Our Sarah Adams Elementary School was going to be recognized, and we had gone through the entire process. And then, as you know, it was kind of taken away. And so I am fortunate enough to be in the state of Illinois because they found it to be very important to continue to celebrate.
Very good. Kudos.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so actually, last week I was able to go to the governor's mansion, and our school was highlighted there for the governor's Blue Ribbon Award. So we now have one at each level. I believe all of our schools should be defined as Blue Ribbon schools, but I think a lot of that work comes out of we have a really strong school improvement process that our curriculum and instruction department, alongside our student services department, put together. It's highly collaborative, so I participated in it as well. My part looks a little bit different than the educator piece, the teacher piece, and the building leader piece, but still no less important in that process because one, I have to be engaged and involved. I have to give commit time to the process, and I have to commit dollars when they're needed for the process. So it's helpful for me to hear from our staff, what do they need here, and so they'll speak to, here's our data, here's what we'd like to do to affect data in a positive way, which will ultimately make great things happen for kids, even better than what's already happening. And so they'll tell us what they need, and it's my job to listen and my job to figure out, after I hear everybody, how can I prioritize those dollars to make good things happen for kids. And so our staff is constantly looking at data, and that's our students' way of communicating with us and telling us where their struggles are, where they're feeling great. And so I think that process in and of itself has really helped us. Additionally, we're not afraid to have outside people come in and audit. So we've had our multilingual services
Very good.
to bottom audited. We kind of got stuck a little bit in our mathematics improvement. And so we had Loyola University come in. They audited us as well, helped us develop a 4-year plan.
Yeah.
We're seeing really good things
So-
in relationship to that. It didn't start with, we did nothing with our staff. We did not change our staff. We have phenomenal teachers, phenomenal administrators. We had to change the supports we were putting in place and help kind of shine a little flashlight on some other things we could do to support our staff who support our kids.
So, when we think about blue ribbon status, most of us, or most people in general, I think about the academic achievement side first. But to have the gap closing is pretty impressive. And so the one question that I have there is, what role did the community and family partnerships play in closing the achievement gaps in thinking about getting the school recognized for blue ribbon status for closing the gap?
So I guess, while we are super excited we were able to gain that title, I don't know that we were sharing with them that that's what we wanted to achieve.
Yes,
For sure.
that's fair. Should.
But we have a couple of things in place that I think really help to build trust within our community and help them to be better partners with us and for us to be better partners with them. And so we do have a parent liaison who works very, very closely with our multilingual families. And so I think having that individual there also builds trust between the community and ourselves. And so they work literally 24/7 with all of our families, making sure all of their needs are met, so that we can have the best relationship possible. So I think that's part of it in making sure that you have that trust there. And while she's one person, she is a superstar.
Yeah.
And she just helps really shine a light on some things we need to do or might need to change. Additionally, that our middle school in particular knew that we needed to provide our staff with some greater strategies and kind of update some of the things that we were doing. And we also, as I said before, we look at our audits, but we had first talked with our state because we knew our data wasn't exactly what it should have been. At least in our minds, we weren't helping our kids get exactly where we wanted them to be. And so we called the state and we asked, did you change anything with the assessment? Can you tell us anything about it? And they really did just say to us, it's time. You need to do something different. What you're doing is not working as well as it should be. We took that to heart. And so we provided additional support in PSYOP training for our staff. And as you know, that's really, really important. It is instruction for all, really.
Right.
And so our teachers went back through some retraining in some cases. We had some engagement training on how do we better engage our students and our families. And so we provided that opportunity, but really we communicate frequently and often with our families. We have good programming, good teachers. We've been so lucky in that we've been able to really attract teachers who speak multiple languages, which is also very helpful.
Right.
And so making sure we're communicating in multiple ways with our families, setting up tons and tons of resources, whether that be food resources or other resources. It could be academics, but it's really wraparounding the whole child and the family. But I think it goes back to what you said earlier. Communication really is key in being able to have that partnership. And whatever it is our families need, our staff is willing to work side by side. If it comes to helping them with immigration status, whatever it is, we're going to work with our families and help them.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, from strategic planning to academic excellence to communication, to just focusing on the whole child. You guys are telling stories that need to be heard, but more importantly, you're doing the work, and we appreciate what you're doing for our students every day. And I'm proud to be your colleague, right? Because yes, proud to be your colleague. So we'll continue to tell the stories and make sure that we are augmenting as much as possible the wonderful work that's happening across this country, because it really does take all of us to get done for our kids what needs to be done. Sure, and I was going to ask you, and there is I was going to say, if there was a closing statement to have for us, have at it.
My closing statement really would be, it starts with a really supportive board of education. And so having a board that's willing to support the superintendent, the work that's happening, willing to support what our kids need is critical. And so I am really fortunate. I have worked with a board since the moment I was started until today, with a board who really is learner focused. And for them, it goes back to our mission statement, and it's about learners being all of us. It's not about learners just being students, it's about all of us, because we all affect student achievement and student success. And so I would just say, I hope that every superintendent could have a board like mine and have people behind them that are supporting them, because that's what we need in order to have success.
And the work does not happen without that, because you cannot get to improvement. You cannot get to change. You cannot get to excellence without noise. And so when the noise comes, you have to have those around you that are supporting what you're doing. They're recognizing that the work that you're doing is student-centered and students are first. So kudos to you, and kudos to your board. Let's give them a round of applause, because not all of our colleagues can say that, right? And so being able to say that, I think, is really important. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure that there are some that are going to have questions, and they can reach out to you directly, right? And I know that you always respond. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.